Welcome to today's podcast episode. This show exists to be able to talk about how TTRPGs have a deeper impact on the people who experience them and how they relate to the world around us. And therefore, we are more than D&D characters. Today's guest, we have Scott Gray, pronouns he, him, who is also known as The Gray Area on TikTok and Instagram. I'm so excited. I'm always so excited, but I'm like so excited to talk to you today. I think it was like a month or so ago that I had reached out to you about possibly being on our show.
Yeah, just about.
Yeah, and it was really fun, like getting a chance to talk with you, and we'd brainstormed so many different ideas on what we could talk about. And honestly, you had so many good ideas. I was like, oh, that'll be good. But then you mentioned that you would be interested in talking about Christianity and how that intertwines with TTRPGs. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited because I had that, brainstormed ideas of different things that I eventually honestly hope to talk about. And this is one that I was like, this might be a tricky one to find. And it's not something you can just ask of someone. It needs to be someone who's like, yes, I do want to talk about this. So the fact that you were like, yeah, I would be totally down to do an episode on that, I was just like thrilled. So I'm so excited. It'll be great.
Me too. I think it's going to be really cool. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm really excited.
Yeah. So tell me, like I said, we did talk about multiple different topics, but why did you end up landing on this topic, or even, were you willing to talk about it in the first place?
Yeah, I am in a unique position where I've gotten the chance to play tabletop role-playing games with several of my friends, and a lot of them have actually I've met them through church, right? So I know a lot of my friends and a lot of the people that I spend a lot of time with. A lot of my community comes through church, through things like that. And so, gosh, probably almost 3 years ago, I was talking to several of them, and one of them offhandedly had mentioned D&D. And I was like, oh, wait, I love D&D. And then 3 other people around the area were like, wait, I love D&D. And so we were just like, all right, we all have to play a game together. And now we've been playing this campaign for several years now. And so because of that experience, I feel like I have a good opportunity to talk about what that looks like, if that makes sense. I think that particularly when you're just talking about religion in general, and then you move into TTRPG spaces where you're improving and you're talking about things. And there's some folks who aren't super open to that. I wanted to be a person who's willing to have those conversations.
Yeah, for sure. And see, that's exactly what I'm saying, though, is that it's not that the position you're in is super, super rare. I just think that it is more rare to be like, yeah, I want to talk about this. Let's talk about it, And so I'm glad that was something that you're eager to do. And also just the fact that in your TTRPG experience, it's been with people that you've known from church and everything. Again, there's so many people who are going to just be interested in this kind of conversation. So. Yeah.
I hope so.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. So let's see if I have anything else besides just explaining that we'll start with jumping into your TTRPG background, kind of what you got started and how did you get started with it and all that kind of stuff. And then we'll kind of jump a little bit more into our deep dive. Actually, I'm saying that. But I feel like it's very intertwined too. So we'll kind of see how it goes. Okay, so first of all, how were you introduced to TTRPGs?
So the first time I was ever introduced to tabletop role-playing games was actually my Uncle Jeff. My dad's brother had been playing probably since Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, maybe second edition. Mm-hmm. He had been playing for a lot of his life. And so he always was just the uncle that I went to when I wanted to talk about nerdy stuff, whether it was video games, whether it was comics, whatever it was, whatever nerd culture I was excited about and interested in, he was the guy that I would go to and talk to about those kinds of things. And so we went and visited them one time when I was maybe in high school. And here and there, he'd mentioned things about Dungeons and Dragons and other tabletop games. And I was just kind of like, okay. I don't know anything about that. And I don't understand anything about that. So I'm just going to kind of keep going, talking to you about Halo and stuff, whatever, no big deal. But when we went and visited them, he had this whole room, an office room that was just full of minis. Like I'm talking shelves of
Wow.
them, as well as like source books and just a whole, like, it was just like a beautiful nerd room. So like half the wall was like minis from D&D. The other half of the wall was just like figurines from Star Wars and things like that. So it was just walking into that room for the first time. I was just like, man, this is awesome. And I had, for a long time, I had kind of like hidden a lot of my like nerdy stuff, talking to like friends and things. Cause growing up, like in, gosh, I was in high school from like 2010 to 2014. I'm almost 30. So like being around that time, nerdy stuff wasn't super open. And so I did get like some bullying here and there for that. And so I never really like got into those kind of things as publicly. And so TTRPGs are kind of a like, hey, community thing. And if you're not super willing to talk about that stuff with people, you don't get to do it. So I never actually got to like play with him, unfortunately, before he'd passed away. But I've always really loved fantasy and storytelling. So he kind of is someone that I always think about as my like first exposure to tabletop role playing games. But the thing that like actually got me into it, if we're going to be real, was definitely the like 2020 pandemic. I had been following several creators online, and there was one who'd specifically had been talking about like, hey, if you're interested in D&D, like you should check out like actual play content. So I was like, oh, okay, like I don't know what I'm doing, so why not? Like this person definitely knows better than me. So I actually listened first to the Adventure Zone, the balance arc specifically. And man, it was just like this epic, goofy, and like heart-wrenching story. And that's something that's like always spoken to me is no matter what like media you consume, I just love really, really good storytelling, whether that's whether it's a podcast or whether it's video games. Like I love a good story. And so from that point forward, I kind of like started picking up on the rule system. Like, okay, like when you ask to do something, you got to roll a D20. And then I started just making characters online. And then I started like meeting new people like online, figuring out through Discord and TikTok and Instagram, like, hey, like, do you play D&D? Do you want to play D&D? Like, let's get into this. And the first game that I ever actually played was a one shot that actually was streamed. And I didn't tell anybody in that stream that this was the first game that I'd ever played. So
Oh
I'm
my
like on
gosh.
this streamed game, and I'm just like freaking out in the back of my mind, like I really hope I don't screw this up. But it was really, really fun. And like through that one shot, I actually got invited to like join a streamed campaign. So yeah,
Wow.
it was that's like kind of the like long arc of how did I actually get into TTRPGs. I'd been introduced a long time ago, but it was really in 2020 when I really started like trying to actively get into that community.
Wow, that's such a fun story. There's so many parts of that that are just amazing. I mean, first, I'm sorry to hear about your uncle. That's, you know, especially sad just knowing that, like, obviously he meant a lot to you and everything.
Yeah.
And it's so cool to have family members that, you know, are into something that maybe doesn't seem the coolest, but you look up to them. And so you're like, I think they're cool. And they like that, right?
Yeah.
And I really do feel like that can kind of change the way that you view yourself too, and gives
Absolutely.
yourself a little bit of permission to be nerdy and be like, I could have a whole nerd room in my house one day, you know, like
one day. I mean, look, if you, I guess if everyone's watching this, like the actual audio, the video portion, not the audio, I've got like just a whole bunch of stuff behind me that's just all nerd focused.
Yes, exactly. See, I love that. And that's the thing to think about that arc of even just knowing your uncle all the way to now. I mean, like all the things that happened in order for you to fall in love with TTRPGs, I just think is so fun. Also, really big fan of anybody who really fell in love with and learned about TTRPGs through podcasts. First of all, because we have a real play podcast. And I think we've been that for a couple of people, but also that was the same for Kate and I. Like we were listening to, Sneak Attack, I think was the first podcast that we had listened to, but that's also how like we got to know the rules and everything. So yeah, that's really cool. Also, lastly, sorry, there's so many things.
No, I talked for like 4 minutes straight for a second.
No, it's great. I love every like little step of that process for you. But the fact that you had that streamed game and that was your first game, but I just know that you were already exposed to so much content and you had done so much research. Like a new D&D player is like my favorite kind of D&D player. They just play so fresh, and they like, once you know the culture and what is like typical to do and all of that kind of stuff. I mean, you can still be a fantastic player, obviously.
Sure.
But like, you're missing a certain shiny element of just like, I am just doing everything that just makes sense to be in that moment as somebody who's still learning. So I love listening to new players. So they were lucky to have you.
Oh my gosh, it's great. Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that, actually. I had a lot of fun getting to play, and it really did convince me to keep playing. And now I DM several games.
Yes. Oh man. And we will get into that. I want to know everything that you're doing right now with TTRPGs. So my other question is, how did you start making TTRPG content online?
Kind of before I actually started going into the TTRPG space online specifically. I had been around like the 2020 pandemic when it was like really, really bad. I was on TikTok. I was watching like several creators, and I saw several who were just like generally making fantasy content. And like the fantasy to TTRPG pipeline is so easy, like, and it's awesome, and I love that because, like, of course you want to get into TTRPGs if you enjoy fantasy, and so because of that, I like saw several awesome creators that which is now crazy. Like, I'm mutuals with several of them now, but like watching these people make these fun videos and recognizing like, oh, like this all kind of. A lot of this comes back to like character creation, like OCs, original characters, things of that nature, and a lot of people make their OCs in that space. We're making them through like character creators on like D&D certain like aspects and things like that. Wow, that was a rough sentence for me to try and say right there. But anyways, I saw these folks doing that, and for a long time, for almost a year by that point, I'd been just making like food content, almost exclusively just making like cafe, like themed lattes, things like that. And so I was like watching all these other creators make like fantasy original character content. And I already had this like kind of cafe theme going. And I was just looking around at it. And I was like, why don't I make like a character who can do these cafe things, but it also allows me to like bridge the gap and get further into like fantasy world, like doing stuff like that. So I made this tavern character named Gray. And I like from that point started just like, I would make like little cocktails. I'd make little lattes. I would just literally just do videos of me pouring coffee, and I would like start like interspersing little story pieces to it. And so like that kind of is what got the Gray area kind of vibe that I ended up making. That's kind of how that was born, was just this decision that I had made right around December of, I think, 2020. I tried to start taking all these pieces of media and bringing them together and all these things that I really enjoyed and like trying to funnel them into one thing that I could use to make content. And so the Gray area was born from there. And just as like I kept making that, I kept running into other D&D creators who were like, oh wait, I'd love to collab with you. Like, this is such a cool concept, like doing stuff outside of time, whatever. And I was like, yeah, man, that sounds awesome. I'd love to do that. I've been following you for like, 8 months now. And I'm like, you're an inspiration to me. Of course I want to collab with you or something like that.
So cool.
Yeah. So like from there, it just kind of kept spiraling isn't the word, because it was a good thing. It wasn't like I wasn't going down a drain. I just kept heading in that direction because, like I said, like I really enjoy a good story. And regardless of the formatting of that story, I love something that just kind of captures your attention in that way. Like, oh, there's something special about a good story. And honestly, I've personally found that tabletop role-playing games, and whether or not you're like watching them through an actual play or listening to them through an actual play or being a participant in those storytelling opportunities in a game, I just love stuff like that, man. Like having the dice get to help tell that story and change what happens, not really knowing what exactly is going to happen. There's a rush that comes from that for me. Like, I love kind of not knowing what's going to happen next. Like, I'll do all this prep as a DM, and then my players will do something insane. I'm like, well, let's roll the dice and see if it happens. And then it does. And I'm like, well, I don't know what to do next, but we're going to find out together, guys.
But I love, with what you do with social media, it is very story based. And that's, I mean, our page, especially at the beginning, started very memey, which is totally fine. But
sure.
So
Absolutely.
much of what people love about TTRPGs is that storyline aspect, the characters, something that's very personable like that. And so I love, and super respect pages like that. And I'm not surprised that people were reaching out like, okay, but like this concept is amazing. Even if you were still in the middle of kind of figuring out your content and you were still growing and all that kind of stuff. It makes me wonder when we started following you, because it's been years. I know we've been following you for years, but like,
I was going to say,
I don't know.
I think that we followed each other very much around the same time, but I could not tell you when. It's been years for sure.
Yeah. It's just wild to think about that, because we also started in 2020 as well. But my guess is we probably found you once you started making more like a fantasy specific. I don't know.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So it's fun to think about.
Who knows?
But yeah. Well, I love your content even still. So it's just really awesome that you have that little space, for yourself. And I'm sure you have an awesome community too, of just people who just love what you put out and appreciate you as a person.
Yeah, I don't make quite as much as I used to, and that's okay. I've made my peace with that. Like, I like making my little bits here and there. Mm-hmm. People can still find me on the internet. People can still find like my like internet like footprint is ridiculous. It's just all over the place. But like, I still make stuff. I still have a lot of fun doing it. It's different now. Like I run several games. I am a dad. I have a museum education job. So like I got a lot of stuff kind of like that I'm juggling. And so content creation isn't something that I do as frequently, but I still really enjoy it when I get the chance to. Yeah. So, I mean, hey, if you're checking it out, you can. I'm not going to make any promises that you're going to find a ton of stuff consistently, but you'll find some stuff.
You know what though? But that's great. Like, social media creation can't be this big, huge, consistent thing for your entire life. Like, that's just crazy, So it's got to ebb and flow with whatever feels right for you.
Yeah.
And I just love that you're still doing anything when inspiration strikes, when you have a minute to post something, like I'm just glad that like you still have a presence there, so it's cool.
Yeah, me too. It's been a lot of fun, honestly.
Very good. So now I'm wondering, what games are you a part of right now? What are you DMing, playing? Okay. Tell me all the things.
All right, let me stretch out really quick, real fast. Okay, so the thing that people can find me, like that you can actually go and listen to or watch. I'm a player in the Misty Mountain Legends Teens in Space campaign that's been going for almost a little over 2 years now, actually. We're currently in our second season. It's called Out of Time. I play a ridiculous, silly, and sweet robot dude called a Calcian. It's not just a robot, but we're going to stick with that for the description here. They're old and rusty, so they don't have a functioning vocal box. So I also voice a sweet little parrot who speaks for them in a voice like this. So, hello, this is Tex and Phil, the parrot. It's really nice to meet you all. I hope you guys are having a really, 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 really great day. So that's one thing that people, that's one thing that people can go and like see, but I also GM 2 or 3 home games. One's a D&D campaign for my brothers and a couple friends of ours. We've been running it for almost 3 years now, which is really insane to think, because, my brother had never played before. And now he's so into it. It's awesome. And it's also just been like really cool to see, like, to like do that with my family, honestly. It's been so much fun, actually. But it's a steampunk theme. The enemy is capitalism, because it always is,
Oh, yes.
So it's very combat oriented, but it's also got a really big focus on world building. So I get to flex my creative muscles differently with this one. Another campaign that I'm running is a Monster of the Week campaign, which I run for 3 of my friends as an offshoot of another game that I will talk about shortly. We've had a couple of scheduling difficulties, not issues, but difficulties because, I had a kid a year ago, and another one of my friends had a kid like 8 months ago.
Oh yeah.
So like,
oh yeah.
stuff like that, sometimes you're there, sometimes you're not, and that's okay. So we kind of built this other Monster of the Week campaign. The Power by the Apocalypse system is so much fun, and it's also really cool to just like, I do so much less prep for that campaign than I do for the other ones, which is really nice for my life. Yeah, so that one's a lot of fun. That one's kind of like a Western like mystery theme for the most part, in the like 1800s, I think. We're making it up. It's still fantasy.
Oh yeah.
But and then the other one that I run, and again, these are all like home games, is a campaign for the same three friends and another friend of ours. But again, I met all of these people through church. And so this one's a lot more role play focused with heavy emphasis on the world building and the exploration. We enjoy some combat here and there, but all of these games are like very, very different, which is really fun for me as a GM because I get to really like flex my creative muscles in different ways. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. You have so much variety there. I mean, first of all, there's just a large quantity, but also like you've got so many. I love the different systems. You get to play in something and it's recorded, and then you have all the DMing, family, and like just, I don't know, all those different elements like is so, so fun. And you know what? D&D games are hard to schedule, period. But if you have a kid and if you have multiple D&D games, it just got exponentially harder.
Yeah, my wife is incredibly kind and is really awesome when it comes to letting me do like a lot of my hobby stuff without having to worry about our daughter. But like what's also really fun is I'll bring her down and like play for an hour and she'll just be like hanging out of my arms trying to reach it and eat the dice, which not great. So we bought her this like big rollable D20.
Oh,
and
cute.
So if like a big roll pops up in the like first hour of the game before she goes to bed, I'll have her roll for it and see what terrible thing happens to my
yes
players.
Oh, that's amazing.
It's really fun. My wife is awesome and is really, really helpful with that. But like as much as I can involve my daughter in the things that I enjoy, I think the better for me and also for her too. So
yeah, cool. That's so fun. Okay, well,
really
now
is.
we
I
have
love
this
it so much.
No, like, and I love having this whole picture of just like kind of where you came from and where you are now, and some of that background, because I think that perfectly primes us to jump into our topic. So, and I'm going to be reading a lot of these questions because a lot of them are a little wordy.
Sure.
Not this first one. So actually, I do want to start with a little bit on your background on just Christianity in itself. And then we can start kind of seeing how that relates to TTRPGs for you.
Absolutely. So, everybody buckle in. This will be a long monologue of some sort. Sorry. Although I'm definitely just talking so much. Apologies.
No,
have to hear my
this
voice.
is exactly what you're here for. And honestly, you're doing fantastic. Like, please talk. I want to hear it all. I don't want you to cut anything out.
I really appreciate that. Okay, cool. So, for the first like 10 years of my life, I grew up in a church. And I really enjoyed it. My parents loved it. They had this like really tight knit community of people that they knew from church, that they loved in church. My great grandfather was a pastor. And so like we'd been in church for like my family at the very least had been in church for a really long time. But my dad got an opportunity to move around the time I was turning 10, so he could get a better job opportunity. And so when we moved, we left behind that church. And my parents tried for probably like consistently 3 years to look for a different church, another church, like home, community, place that they like aligned with theologically and like agreement on what like the Bible says and stuff like that. So they like tried, but ultimately they did not and still have not found a church home. And it's been 20 years since then. And so part of it was like definitely theology. They're part of a denomination called the Church of Christ, which is a Protestant church. I'm going to throw out a whole bunch of like Christian words at you guys. Real sorry about that.
No,
like,
it's great.
If you're worried about like, mainly like for our audience, like if you're worried about like the differences between some of these, you can definitely Google them. They are like helpful to understand. But like, they're not like that important to the story if you're worrying about it. But anyways, it's a Protestant church that practices a cappella singing and then focuses on local church structure rather than having like a really large leadership structure that kind of like helps govern certain portions of a church, right? And so because of this, those churches are very vastly different from each other because you have only local leadership kind of leading those things. And so my parents really loved the one that they had in North Carolina, where we lived for the first 10 years of my life. But when we moved to Virginia, where they are now, they just didn't find any in the local area that they were like really happy with. So the next 8 years of my life, I was basically without church and without religion. So I wasn't really looking for anything. I wasn't paying attention to it. If someone had asked me, I would have said, yeah, like I'm a Christian, but I'm not like doing anything to like involve myself in it.
Yeah.
But around like the time I turned like 17 and then 18, I started like dating people and getting hurt through dating people. And so around the time I was like 17 and 18, my mom really started to encourage me to go to this thing called Young Life, which is a Christian ministry that she actually had participated in as a kid. And at first I said, no, don't want to do that. And so she volunteered to host it at our house. So I didn't have a choice but to go to this thing. And so I started going. I almost immediately fell in love with it. I think that something that Young Life as a ministry does really, really well is it just encourages kids to be kids. It's very fun oriented and talks about like why Jesus matters and why we care about him. Why are we still talking about him after 2000 years of his death? That kind of thing. And so anyways, through that ministry, I like started to follow Jesus. I started really attaching to, like what these leaders had been talking about, this understanding that like, no matter like the hurt that I feel, no matter the like pain that I'm going through, and also no matter like how I mess up in whatever context that may be, whether that is through a relationship where I hurt somebody, whether that is through like a disappointment to a parent, anything along those lines, like whatever that is, like Jesus is still going to love me. Like that was communicated so clearly to me through that ministry and through the people who cared so deeply about me that I started following Jesus. And so I like not only started to actively consider myself a Christian at that point, but I started to actively do stuff to like look like a Christian, if that makes sense. So yeah, I'd been through some like rough spots throughout my grade school experience with bullying, as I'd mentioned. I never really felt comfortable with myself. But like through the teachings of Jesus, I've really genuinely come to understand myself so much better and even to accept the way like God created me as a neurodivergent person. Unsure exactly what that neurodivergency is because I won't go to a doctor, but you know, that's, I'm going to say the quiet part softly there, you know? But yeah, anyways, since then, I've been in church ever since. So it's been over 10 years actually, since I started, actively pursuing a relationship with Jesus and actively trying to follow the teachings of the Bible. And so, I've led Young Life, actually. I basically started leading it almost the same summer that I'd accepted Jesus. I started trying to like help lead middle school kids. I was garbage at it, but I was trying to do that. I led when I went into college. I led for 4 years working with high school kids, talking to them about like, who is Jesus? Why do we care about him? And just, again, encouraging kids to be kids, giving them safe places to be, and just like enjoy being a kid, being in high school without like having to look for things that maybe would remove that innocence of childhood. Right. And then I started like helping lead in my local church. So I was leading middle school and high school youth there for 2-ish years. And now I lead college and young adult ministries at my local church with my wife. So still doing stuff. I'm actually on the worship team for my church as well. So yeah, I mean, I have for the past 10 years tried to really involve myself in the like church and really immerse myself in the teachings of Jesus. Because I want my life to look like him, you know? So yeah, that is my Christian background boiled down. Yeah, I mean, I'm still doing it.
Yeah. No, that's so cool. And I mean, it's cool that like all the way back at that like 17, 18-year-old, age, that you had gained that interest and said, this is something that I care about. This is something that I value. And that it's been, a decade since then, and that it's still something that it like,
there's some weight to that.
Yes, there really is. There really is. So just the fact that like that's been such a big part of your life for so long is honestly super cool. And it's interesting then to think about like TTRPG stuff, just timeline wise, and the fact that like, it's been a chunk of years for both of those things. And they're both things that I know you care a lot about, both of them. So it only makes sense that in some way, shape, or form, like they're going to have some crossover in your life,
Yeah.
So
very much so. Very much so.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. So now I want to know when, or I guess, how do you feel like Christianity and TTRPGs started to collide for you? Was there kind of a point that happened?
So like, it's funky because as a Christian, like everything that I do, like I should be going back to like the teachings and precepts of Jesus, right? So like everything that like I do, I should be looking through that lens. So there's kind of always, no matter what hobby that I get into, I should, keyword should, I should always kind of be thinking about, well, how do these things intersect and work together or work against each other? And if that's the case, what do I do next? But the moment that I kind of like saw it really clearly colliding for me for the first time was kind of in a bad way, if I'm going to be honest. So the very first campaign that I'd ever gotten to be a part of was with a guy that I met online. He'd reached out to me and several other content creators kind of in the fantasy sphere and asked us to stream a D&D campaign with him. And we were like, yeah, that sounds great. So I've met really awesome friends through that. That campaign lasted for around 4 months. And I mean, y'all, it was really fun. It was really, 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 really fun. We all had a really great time working together. We had a really good camaraderie. There was a great, like, we built a good rhythm to story beats. We built a good rhythm to character moments. We had really like good, like plays off of each other with just silly goofiness. We gained a lot of, not like, we weren't like super successful guys. I'm not like trying to build this up to be like, yeah, this was amazing, you should have seen it. Like, no, like it was a pretty small following, but it was a following. Several of us personally had purchased art for our characters or for moments in the campaign that had already happened. One of us was making stickers to sell, to like make merch for our characters and things. And then unfortunately, right out of like, it really felt like it came out of nowhere. Our DM messaged us and told us, hey, I don't think I can. It wasn't even, I don't think. He said, I cannot play this game anymore because of my Christian beliefs. And I want to make this clear for everybody. Like, I do not hold that against him or even think that it's wrong that he stopped playing because of his Christian beliefs. He had a strong conviction that this tabletop role-playing game, Dungeons and Dragons, was hurting his relationship with God. And I'm not a person to say if it was or was not. That's not something that I can do. That's only something that he can kind of come to the conclusion of on his own with conviction from his understanding of the Bible and conviction from the Holy Spirit, right? So I do not hold that against him that he decided, hey, this isn't for me anymore. However, he handled it really, really poorly. And that is what I do have frustration for. There wasn't any warning. We'd been investing in like 4 to 5 hours of our lives at night, several times a month to play this game, to play this campaign. And it felt really bad to have kind of all of it ripped out from underneath us. I'm not going to speak to the exact reasons why this person felt like they could not continue playing the game. They had a conviction. That's their business, right? But it was devastating to our group as a whole. I still speak with several of the people who are from that group, and it's still sore spot for at least 2 or 3 of them. And it was really hard even for me because I was trying to talk to this guy and even understand it. And so as it's like happening, I'm in this position now of like, I'm the other like openly Christian person in this group. What do I do with this information now? Like if this person that is like running this game for us feels like it is a sin for him to keep playing this game, does that mean it is? Like, does that mean it is for me even? So I prayed about it with my wife a lot, actually, kind of in the following weeks of that. And I obviously have landed in a place where I didn't feel like that was the case. I decided that it wasn't something that was, let me not say that. I did not feel convicted in the way that this person did, that Dungeons and Dragons was pulling him away from his relationship with God. And so for me, that's not something that I have felt. I have not felt like Dungeons and Dragons, this hobby, has ever pulled me away from my relationship with Jesus. It has at times felt like I have understood God better through certain interactions that I've had playing this game, which is cool and interesting. But again, like, I'm not a person to like decide whether that's right or wrong for somebody else. Like, it's, whenever I think about these kinds of things, I kind of try to look at it through the lens of like, some people are going to have things in their lives that they can do and that they can't do. Like, for some people, alcohol, they can't have it. And that's okay, right? Like, they understand that, they have that conviction, they know what it does to their body, they know how they feel about it. That's fine. Okay. Totally get that. Same thing with like tobacco or things, or even drugs. If that's a thing that people participate in, it's a very personal choice, right? It's very like, that's not something that I'm tending to speak on. Okay. So anyways, just because I can enjoy something in a healthy way doesn't mean that everyone can. So my frustration with this person had nothing to do with his faith or his religion, but just the way he handled it was very poor. There wasn't any empathy towards the loss that the rest of us experienced. And maybe part of that was him trying to deflect that feeling of loss for himself too. But it felt very just cold talking to him from that point forward, which really, really sucked. Because again, we'd all become very fast friends over the course of 4 to 6 months with all the session zeros and the prep that we had before. Like, we felt really, really close to each other. And so to have that kind of like just removed really sucked. So that was like one clear moment where I had to sit down and really think and pray and meditate on, well, okay, like, if this is something that for him would be detrimental for his relationship with God, is that something that's going to be the case for me as well? And through prayer, through reading, through taking time and talking to people about it, even getting counsel from people that I trust and care about, I came to the conclusion that for me, no, it isn't. Now, I've had other things challenge me in the midst of TTRPGs when I'm trying to figure out my relationship with God and figure out my relationship with TTRPGs, where I have been challenged in that way. But I personally do not arrive at the place where I need to stop, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. You know, it takes a certain amount of humbleness to be able to simply witness that situation, you know, and the decision that DM had made, and then to say, oh, maybe I should reflect on myself, and like, maybe this is something I feel like maybe I should be considering too, you know? And so I don't know. I think that aspect of it is honestly really cool. That kind of like gave you that opportunity to be self-reflective in that moment as well. Like, I think, not that it was a good situation, but like, I mean, in a way, I'm almost glad that you like had something to gain from that because of how you chose to or what you chose to take from that in a way, you know? But I mean, that's a huge disappointment. Like the connections that you make through D&D and the amount of commitment that it feels and how committed you are to, I mean, each other, but also just the storyline and your characters, and to have that like just disappear so fast, like that can be 100% devastating.
Yeah, we went back and forth for probably 6 months afterwards with the rest of the crew at thinking about having one of us pick up DMing or having another person try to finish DMing, and it just never got anywhere with it. So yeah, it was really tough. I'm still disappointed by it. I still have my old character sheet. Like, I won't let it go. I'm just not gonna. I have come to terms with it and I'm like at peace about it. But it still sucked. And for several of my friends, like, it still is a very sore spot for them. So yeah, that was like the first big moment for me where I saw these two things in my life that I care about a lot collide, and it wasn't in a great way. And it did encourage that self-reflection, which I think is important for me now, because I do want to make sure that I'm self-reflective whenever I'm doing anything, honestly. It may not always happen in the moment, but I want to make sure that if I always want to make sure that like whatever I participate in, I want it to be something that's like good, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So if it's something that isn't, I want to make sure that I'm paying attention to that. And again, so far, TTRPGs are good. And
Yeah.
I'm not planning to change my mind on that anytime soon. And I don't think God is planning to change my mind on it anytime soon either. So I'm having a great time.
For sure. So speaking of TTRPGs being a good thing for you, I also want to know if you've had moments where playing TTRPGs has like deepened your understanding of your faith or has kind of come into play in that way.
Yeah, it's a funky thing to think about. For me in particular, I think that for me, like in this home game that I have with my church friends, right? I homebrewed most of this world. So I created like a pantheon of these like godlike characters and things of that nature. And one of the characters decided to be a cleric. So they were like, all right, hey, will you help me make some like words and phrases and things that they can say from their holy book when they're casting spells? So I was like, okay, yeah, let's do it. So I did a deep dive on the Psalms, the Proverbs. I went into the Gospels and other like really imagery heavy spots throughout the Bible, to kind of help me think of some like, you know, kind of okay things and semi profound stuff to say, involving this like character's work. And this goddess, is again, it's a pantheon. So it's not the same as like Christianity and Jesus, but they were like talking about the vibe of like what they wanted their character to kind of embody. And so for me, like, that's the immediate thing that I'm going to be excited about, like in terms of religion, even in a tabletop game, is I'm going to look to what I personally think is like going to be best. And for me, that's the Bible, right? So I went through and I read, man, I did a like solid study, just like going through. And it's kind of just gotten me to even now. And like, I did that work like probably a year and a half, almost 2 years ago. But even now, like because of that dive that I've done, I am able to understand some of the imagery that comes through reading those things. When you read through different parts of the Bible, there's like all this just rich imagery and prophecy that comes with the like arrival that points to the arrival of Jesus, right? And so in doing all of this deep dive, kind of for not a silly reason, but doing it for something that's not like for my own edification, even through doing it that way, I am then able to actually still be edified. I'm still able to learn and still able to recognize just the importance of that imagery, in my own readings of the Bible now, even today, right? Like, I can read through Isaiah and understand like part of that scripture better because I remember the phrases that I read when I was doing this study, in the Psalms or even in the Proverbs as well. So yeah, there've definitely been those kind of moments that like kind of like obviously have deepened my understanding of my faith. But I also find that like tabletop role-playing games, because they are so community based, they are so community focused, so is church, so is religion, whether it's Christianity or not. I've done my own like readings and research on several other world religions, but like regardless of what you're looking at, so many of them are reliant upon community. There is a very important aspect to that. And so whenever you gather with like-minded people, you're going to be changed in some way, shape, or form. And so I'm grateful that for me, like the people that I keep choosing to surround myself with are like, I'm very careful about that because I want them to be good people. They don't have to be Christians. But I want them to be good people. And so it's been really cool for me, even playing this game with my friends from church. Like we'll talk about stuff in the moment or even post like game and realize like, like, you know, that like moment, maybe that wasn't something that was like healthy for us. Like, let's shift that. Let's move on. Let's either we can retcon that, we can go back, or we can just say like, we're just not going to do that again.
Yeah.
And so like, there's this phrase from the Bible, iron sharpens iron. It's very common. But like when you do that with people who are like-minded, you are going to keep growing. And so whether that's with my friends at my table here in the house playing with my church buddies, or if that's with or if it's with my Misty Mountain Legends crew, like they're all awesome people. And because of that, like I'm going to be made better through my interactions with them. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that comparison of community. Still, I mean, we can recognize that it's still very different, but to
Absolutely.
take that element and just the value of that in both of those spaces, I think that's really comparable. I also love what you were sharing about, like, you know, reading the Bible, which is a book you've read so much, but to use it in a way in your campaign.
Yeah.
To me, I think that would help me read it with such fresh eyes, because you're, you know, like you read for the same kind of reasons, like for the most part. And
Sure,
the
yeah.
idea of like going in with a different purpose just sounds like that would be kind of refreshing in a way. And like you said, I'm not surprised that there are things that you remember part of that because it was connected to something that was just kind of unique like that. So
Yeah.
I actually think that's really cool.
It was a really fun study, honestly. I really genuinely enjoyed doing it for my friend. And so we'd like, and like I said, we'd talked about it for a little while there. And so we still have a living document actually that we can keep adding verses to. So like every couple months, I'll drop in a new one and she'll be like, wait, this is awesome. And then she'll drop another one back into. So it's still like a working, living thing for us to keep adding to and having some fun with. But yeah, no, I think it is a really cool kind of moment to be able to look at that. Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure. So now I'm wondering if there's a particular character that you've played that has been spiritually significant to you.
So I don't get to play as much anymore. I'm mostly DM now, which I love doing. I am the forever GM who really likes being the forever GM every so often. And look, like some people, like they do it because they have to. I get it. Like you just want to play, so you'll do whatever, right? I love getting to GM. It's so much fun for me. I love getting to just offer some kind of challenge or whatever and watch my friends freak out about it. It's the best, right? So the only consistent character that I got to play for a long time has been the character from Misty Mountain Legends, and that's Tex. And I would say, like, because I actually thought about this a little bit more after I had kind of like briefly mentioned this, like when we briefly talked about this question before, like I kind of had a thought of like, like sort of. The more that I've thought about it and the more that I've like really given it some time, I would definitely say Tex has been like a more spiritual case for me, right? So I've been, like I said, we've been playing this game for almost 2 years now, or over 2 years now, actually. Oh gosh, it's crazy. And so I started this game without really knowing a lot of these people, but like through playing with them, many of like they're all some of my closest friends at this point, like just genuinely they were probably the first people, but I think I actually told them before I told my family members that my wife was pregnant. I think I actually told them before that, which was really crazy.
So special. They're so privileged.
Yeah. No, they are very, oh my gosh, they're the best people. They really, really are. Anyways, sorry. Misty Mountain Legends, Cash Crew, I love you guys. Anyways, so the story of season 1, right? It's all about just found family. It's about creating a community and choosing to be together regardless of whatever their circumstances are, right? I find that kind of story, that is, in a lot of ways, there are a lot of parts of the Bible that are very much that. Like, what we're told through the Bible is that Jesus chose us, his followers, his people, and he chose to die for us so that we could have life and live it to the full, right? That anyone who chooses to follow him is a part of that family, and that regardless of their circumstances prior to making that decision, and even regardless of the failures they make along the way or the missteps or whatever it is, Jesus is still going to love them regardless of that, right? Jesus calls them to something greater, but Jesus loves them regardless, loves us regardless, right? And so that, like, that story of season 1, that's no one in that story is Jesus. Let me be very clear. No one in that story is Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bunch of silly teenagers trying to survive and rage against the capitalist regime. If we're going to be honest, a little bit. There's a little theme for me, you know, raging against capitalism a little bit, you know. But yeah, that idea, right? Caring about people, even through their flaws, even when it's dangerous, is very much the story of season 1. And also trying to remain true to yourself, even in the face of difficulties, sticking to your convictions, especially when it's easier to break them. That's very much the season 1 story. And so far, because we're in the middle of recording season 2, and man, has it been wild. Season 2 has been a continuation of those, but with the addition of really insane cosmic horror and dealing with powers beyond your mortal comprehension, and also reconciling that your existence is very fleeting, but still has purpose. So there are a lot of parts to playing Tex that I attribute to myself because, and you guys have actually talked about this on this podcast before, like, a lot of people, when they're playing a character, they insert part of themselves into that. Like, part of, even if you don't do it intentionally, right? There's a part of you that is always going to kind of live in whatever character you make. And I absolutely believe that. And so as I've been playing Tex, I think about all those kinds of things that I just mentioned a ton. I think about community a lot because Christianity is inherently community based. It is a deep central tenet and core to the Bible and following Jesus is that you're not meant to do any of this alone, right? And so how you like care about people, how you love people. And if you want to look like Jesus, you love them even in the midst of the things that they're like struggling with, that you're struggling with when you're interacting with them. Like, Jesus loves you and them through those things, right? And I think that, like, when I'm playing Tex, that is so deeply what Tex wants to do for people. Tex wants to be a person that can, when they've chosen to love somebody, they are not going to go back on it, regardless of how frustrating they are, regardless of how dangerous the circumstances might be, in order to keep loving that person. Whatever it is, Tex wants to be the kind of person, even though they're a robot, they want to be the kind of person who can hold that weight and still care about somebody else. And also, there's a lot of, and you know, if you go listen to season 1 and then eventually season 2, like, there's a lot of struggle for Tex in terms of, like, they've got their own convictions and how do they stick to them without, like, losing themselves in the midst of that. And that's something that's really, like, that's also something that I think that I walk through a lot, like, as a Christian, right? Like, we're called as a Christians to be in the world, not of it. And that sounds so pretentious. I get it. But the idea that, like, we have to hold on to this understanding that this world is just for this world, that there's way more beyond it. And if we're talking eternity is so much more than just this, and recognizing that, like, our actions have consequences here in this realm, but also matter in eternity as well. So yeah, I think that these are things that I think about a lot. And I think people deal with these feelings and these thoughts a lot too, regardless of if they, like, follow Christianity or follow Jesus or not.
Right.
But for me, like, Christianity provides someone to trust with those answers to questions, even if I don't understand the answer to it yet.
Yeah. Wow. You touched on so many things. And what's so cool about that is just through one character in a storyline, how many life lessons there are, and, you know, even just things to ponder on and consider, and all those parallels that it has to real life. Like, and honestly, this is the whole reason that I wanted to make this show in the first place, is just to show that, like, these games are so significant, and they're not, it's not just a story. It's not just a game, you know? And so even just to hear you talk about that and say, like, yeah, you know, the more I've thought about it, like, yes, of course, this character has been spiritually significant. And I have a feeling that you probably DM your games in a similar way, where you want aspects of it to feel significant. Not that the game's always about, I don't know, learning things and trying to guide your entire life and everything. But just the fact that that can exist at all in that space, to me, is just incredible. It's so, so cool. So I love hearing you think about all of that. And also just like, it feels so inspiring as far as like what these stories can be. You know, when I think about, DMing a game or being a player, or even just when I'm listening to a show, to think that like, that's like, yeah, the possibilities are really like so vast in what it can
Yeah,
accomplish, even in like a real life kind of way. So thank you for sharing
absolutely.
all that. And,
Oh
you
my
know,
gosh. Of
thinking
course.
on all
Thank you for
that.
having me to be able to share any of this stuff, you know?
Yes. Yes, of course. Like this is your stage. I'm like literally loving every bit of it. um, let's see.
It's a
So
stage you provided, and I really do appreciate it. Seriously, this is so much fun. I'm loving getting to like just talk with you guys.
yes, well, actually, and I'm curious. Like it, I don't know. Has there ever been a time that you've talked about a lot of this stuff, whether it's been on your social media or on a show, or I mean, maybe even just with friends and stuff?
Yeah, I talk about this stuff a lot with like my close friends. I'm grateful for the platform that I have in some ways. And so like I will share in some small senses here and there, like the explicit Christian pieces that I'm like sharing and talking about here. But I find for me, like, I think something that's really powerful about Christianity is that people should be able to tell that there's something a little bit different about you, even if you don't say you're following Jesus. So for me, like, and I don't mean different in like, oh, I'm special. Like the way I carry myself, my hope and my goal is that I carry myself to look like a good person, not just in a like societal sense, but in a sense of like, man, Scott really cares about people. Scott really cares about like loving others well. Scott really cares about justice and cares about like things that everyone does, you know, like everyone cares about those things. But I want to carry myself in a way by following Jesus. And I do think that like by following Jesus, it should be evident in your life, regardless of if it's on social media or not, that you care about those things.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so explicitly, not in like my social media sense, not really, if I'm going to be honest, but I'm hopeful that because of the way that I present myself and because of the way that hopefully I just am because I'm following God, right? My hope is that people can pick up on those things. So like the tiny things of like in my bios, I have Jesus first. Seems super silly, but like when people watch a video and they're like, "Man, like that was really cool. Like where does that like thing come from? Where does that care for people come from? Why does he care so much about safety tools? Why does he care so much about like good like being a good person everywhere in your thing?" They go to my profile, they see that and be like, "Oh, that's why." Hopefully, you know? So
Yeah.
like I've talked about this kind of stuff with like my Missy Mountain Legends crew a little bit. I've talked about it with all my friends from church for sure. I've talked about it with my brothers as well. Neither of them are like practicing Christians. So like for them, like I talk about it. My hope is that like there's an understanding for them that like that's why I am the way that I am and that's why I care about those things. Right. So
Yeah.
yeah. That's kind of like hope does that answer your question a little
Yeah,
bit?
no, it totally does. I'm just
Okay.
curious like how much that's been vocal, or even like you said, even non-vocal, but just still there's just messaging there, and that's been, yeah, something that you've shared in one way or another. So yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Well, we've had so many like positive things, but my next question is like a little more negatively geared. But I'm wondering if there was ever a time that you felt tension between your faith and your interest in TTRPGs.
So yes, as I mentioned, like that first campaign really was like that first moment of like, oh, like do I get to keep doing this? Is this something that I like should continue like investing in, right? And again, like ultimately, I've landed in a place where yes, I do, and I'm really glad for that. I'm really excited about that. If that changes, I would be disappointed and sad, but I would, you know, like that's why I want to keep being self-reflecting, right? And not even like I've had to do that because my faith's been challenged other times as well. In particular, like past couple of months, I like had been challenged. My wife's so good. She challenged me actually, because she'd like heard me say some things that I like normally wouldn't say. I'd been cussing a little more than I usually would, basically. And so my wife like called me out on that. And I was like, huh, I wonder why. And like that literally like 3 days later after she called me out on that, there was a sermon that our pastor gave talking about like this particular scripture, Colossians 3, verses 8 through 10, which says, "But now you must put them all away: anger, wrath, malice, slander, and obscene talk from your mouth." Obscene talk is the one that I was getting wrecked with there. But it also says, "Do not lie to one another, seeing that you have put off the old self with its practices and have put on the new self, which is being renewed in knowledge after the image of its creator." So like I said, my wife, she's so good. She noticed that my language was changing. I was cussing a little more than I normally would just outside of my D&D games. And so when I was role playing, I was not acting as myself. And so often I'd use words that like weren't in my vocabulary. However, some of those words were making their way into my regular vocabulary. And so because it was really getting into my like personal vocabulary, it was starting to affect the way that I spoke just generally. Right. And so because of that, I really like sat down and had to like think and pray about that and be like, okay, like, all right, if I am meant to be in the world and not of it, I need to guard myself. I need to pay attention to like what is affecting me, regardless of if that is something that I really enjoy. If it's affecting me in a negative way, it shouldn't be, right? So like I said, there's that like difficult balance to maintain where like I'm here, I am a person, I am sentient, I'm gonna die one day. I share in that with everyone, shares in those truths, right? Like that's just how that goes. But if I want to look like Jesus, I need to make sure that I'm paying attention to how my hobbies, how my media that I consume, how everything that I partake in this world, how that influences me as a person. And if it's pulling me away from God, then I need to reevaluate and shift, right? And so in my games as I GM, I've tried to cut as much cussing out as I possibly can. I'll slip up here and there once every so often, but I've really tried to be more intentional with that, because if I'm gonna look like Jesus, I need to look like Jesus everywhere, not just in church, not just in my job, not just in my marriage or as a father. I need to look like Jesus even when I'm playing a game, even if it's make believe. Like I still want to look like Jesus in those moments. So yeah, I'm that is definitely a way that like my faith has been challenged. And again, like that was in a way that wasn't like super great for me, but recognizing, and again, maybe that's even because of the like difficulties that I'd had prior, like, and because I also have an awesome wife, who's going to challenge me with those things, I was able to then make those shifts and recognize like, okay, like I don't want to keep sounding like this. I don't want to keep acting like this. I'm going to make some changes. So,
yeah. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you for being willing to share about that. I think that's a really, cool experience to be able to talk on. I really love the idea that Christianity has that kind of central standard to be able to compare yourself to with Jesus.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that that's really cool. And so as far as, and like you said, showing up in all different spaces of your life and still being able to have that central idea. So, and that would, include TTRPG spaces, which is, I mean, like to me, that sounds obvious, but I do think that for some people, whether it's video games or it's TTRPGs or it's when you're hanging out with the boys, like sometimes all of that just kind of like melts away. You know what I mean? Like a lot of people have that viewpoint of like, well, this is kind of my little space and time to chill a little. And so I like that still is so important and applicable to you, even when you're playing a game.
No, you should be yourself no matter what like scenario you're in, I feel, right? Like I think that like core tenet of Christianity has centered me and grounded me in so many ways. I'd kind of mentioned this at the beginning. Like, I didn't really know who I was for a very long time in my life. And until I started following Jesus, I wasn't able to like piece it out. I was somebody else when I was with a certain group of friends. I was a different person with a different group of friends. I was a different person when I was like hanging out with my girlfriend at the time. And that is one, exhausting because you're not meant to do that. Like, you are meant to be who you are. Right.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people, and I'm grateful that people like are able to find that like grounding and central like understanding in their lives, regardless of how they find it. I'm grateful for them because that is a good thing. Like, you should be able to be, you should be yourself regardless of what situation you are in, right? Like, you should care about justice when it is really, really important in the moment. And you should care about it in the simple little things too, right? Like, that should not change because a situation has changed. You should still have those same core values. I find for me, Christianity makes that very clear, which is great. But again, I know several people who like hold true to those ideals regardless. And that's awesome too. So anyways, I find that to be very important.
Yeah. Very, very, very cool. So my next question is, how has your view of good, evil, redemption, or morality shown up differently because of your faith while gaming with TTRPGs?
I love this question, first and foremost. It's such a good friggin' question. I don't like the idea that a person is truly irredeemable. And I think that that comes from my walk with Jesus. This is like it is a difficult thing to like wrap your mind around sometimes because people can be so truly devastatingly horrible. Like, you can meet a random person on the road and be like, man, that person sucks. Like, that was the rudest, meanest person I've ever met in my life. You can see it on social media and recognize that was really horrible. You can see it in our government leaders throughout an entire freaking world that there are truly horrible and what feels like irredeemable people in this world. I personally want to have the hope that everyone can be redeemed. And I do think for me, that comes from my interaction and walk following Jesus. So I do think that like people, I don't think everyone will be redeemed. I think everyone can be. And I hope everyone will be. I don't think everyone will though, right? People are always going to have the chance and the opportunity to do good or to do evil, right? That is just a reality. And some people, no matter how many times you offer goodness to them, are going to choose the other direction. For me, in media, I don't mind it as much. However, like, I prefer my like stories and my media to have some potential for redemption. Doesn't mean that I want them to always have that redemption, because sometimes they don't deserve it, right? But like I said, like, I am always reminded that no matter how awful a person is, like, Jesus chose to die for my sins and my misgivings and my evil and theirs too. For everyone's. That offer is on the table for every person to exist and live, right? So he cares about everyone in this world equally, enough to die on a cross to blot out our sins and erase that mistake, and then even resurrect from the dead to have a relationship with us as a living God. And so if the God of the universe is willing to go through all of that just to give people the opportunity to be redeemed, not even to like choose it, like, because God's not a bully. He's not going to make you choose to follow him. But to even do that, knowing that some will say yes and some will say no, like, I will always want to offer up that idea of redemption. I will always want to offer it up, right? Now, as a DM, that gets a little difficult because there's always a bad guy, you know? There's usually a bad guy in order to like push people forward and continue the story, because otherwise you're running a different kind of game. And you know what? Cozy games like that, like just being a like cafe or tavern owner, that stuff rocks. Okay. That's so much fun. Okay. If you want to play those, play those. They're fantastic. Please do it. But if you're going to play a game like D&D, generally speaking, there's going to be a villain of some sort. So for me, if I've got a humanoid character, like a person, someone who's capable of human emotions and thought, right? As I'm creating that NPC, they need to have some kind of a motivation in order to do those things that are going to create that like evil or horrible thing in the world, right? So anytime that my characters fight like a bandit or something, my mind and my motivation for them is like, okay, like they've got a family to take care of, or the officials in this region are corrupt, so I don't have a choice. Like, so then that like motivation is their like thought, right? Doesn't mean that their actions were ever okay. Robbing folks and hurting people is rarely going to be justifiable as a player, let alone as a like NPC baddie, you know? But again, still going to try to take that stance. And I'm also like, in terms of like offering up that redemption, if you're like in the final fight and your buddy rolls a nat 20 to convince the villain that they're wrong, like, no, you can be redeemed in the light. And they've like, you know, the entire time shown zero even thoughts of like, yeah, everything I'm doing is horrible. That cheapens redemption for them, that villain, to be like, oh my gosh, you're absolutely right. Man, I'm not going to go sacrifice those like 10 people over there now. Dude, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Like, really, like, that's whack, right? There is a like, anyways, when we're talking about media and storytelling, that is whack, right? That for me, like, that's something that I like wrestle with, like, because again, like, if I'm following biblical teachings, God offers it that way, right? Like there's a story in the Bible of Jesus, like as he's dying on the cross, he's being crucified in this moment. There are two criminals next to him. One of them is like defending Jesus in this moment, where one of these other criminals is like, hey, you're the son of God. Like if you can just get us off this cross, like, why are you still up here? And the other guy's like, hey, like he wouldn't be up here if he didn't want to be. Like he's up here for a reason. And also he's clearly innocent. Whereas you and I both did something bad to get up here and land us here. This guy is obviously not supposed to be here. And Jesus like agrees with him in that moment. The guy says, Lord, remember me in your kingdom. And Jesus said, you will be with me there today, actually. And that like is so crazy because that like, there's no like build up to that redemption. That person is simply like decides to like understand who Jesus is, that he is the Son of God, that he is the King of Kings, Lord of Lords. And he is immediately in that moment like, yeah, you're God and you can just do it. And there's like a reverence there. And Jesus was like, yeah, you're going to be in my kingdom today. Like in media, right? There's a difference between that and real life. Because in real life, like Jesus offers that redemption, period. So that is like, there's a tension to that, like for me as a person, because like in media, like I want that redemption to feel like it was earned because it's a story and it's supposed to be entertaining. Jesus is an after entertainment, right? So anyways, sorry, slight aside there, because I thought that was a good thing to share. But like, when we're talking morality, like, yeah, it gets like tricky, you know, as a player, it's a little different from like when I'm a GM. As I've said, I play text. Text is awesome. They care very deeply about the world that they are living in. And their sense of morality is mostly tied to their relationships and their care for people. So they're willing to do like messed up stuff in order to protect people who cannot protect themselves. Text doesn't personally find joy in it and actually prefers not to fight. I built Tex as a character. The way I was like building them prior to like the events of the game, they were a robot born to fight, born to kill. And they personally decided they didn't want to be that anymore. So they started to dismantle their body to prevent them from being dangerous. So now on their character sheet, they can take a hit because they are strong body and robot and all that cool stuff, but they are bad at actually fighting, right? So their ability is less of like actually fighting and more about like taking the hits and protecting people. So anyways, I think that it is difficult whenever you talk about redemption and you're like trying to do that in a fantasy fun way. Like you want it to be earned, right? Like everyone wants a redemption arc to be like Zuko from Avatar: The Last Airbender because it's phenomenal. It's so good, right? And he earned it in a way. But there's like, you know, in if we're gonna like follow the teachings of the Bible, like there isn't any earning it. You can't earn it. In fact, we're told several times that when we don't deserve it and we can't earn it, it's just a gift, right? So some people are going to reject that gift and some people are going to accept that gift. And that's really hard, but you don't stop offering that chance at redemption, right? So yeah, I feel like I rambled a whole bunch there, but like good, evil, redemption, morality, all of that is tied to my faith. And so all of that shows up in the way that I game. So regardless of if that's like DMing, GMing, or if that is being as a player, like it's all going to come back to that in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. Yeah. No. And like everything you said was super, super relevant to that question for sure. And it's so interesting. Again, the real world aspect of those concepts, but then also adding that into the games and the way that that really increases storytelling as well. And even as a non-religious person myself, I still agree with so much of what you're saying as far as just the fact that, you know, change is always possible. Redemption is always possible. That doesn't mean it's easy. That doesn't mean that people will take you up on it or actually do it. But that it's possible. And I also appreciate what you were saying just about how, like, you know, people don't do horrible things with no motivation either. Right. And so I think that, again, in life, but also in trying to have really good storytelling and an arc of some sort, whether it's for a villain or a DMPC or just a player character in general. Like there's so much there, but it makes it so much more fascinating and immersive to really think about the fact that that really does have real world application there as well. So I love all of those thoughts. And I think that's got to be part of what makes TTRPGs interesting to you is it is those concepts of what we're talking about here, you know, and the fact that is part of what relates to real life, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like tabletop role playings give you the opportunity to play those things out. And sometimes you're playing them out because you've got someone who like you want to forgive and you can't. And so you're like playing that situation out, which like, you know, that feels horrible, but sometimes that's something that we do because we need that. We want that catharsis, right? Or sometimes we need someone to forgive us and they won't because we did something pretty bad and pretty messed up. And being able to like play that out in a game, like not only is that a really good story, but there is something to tabletop role-playing games that like can allow you to work through those really difficult emotions that you're not always able to do in real life, without feeling too afraid to do it, if that makes sense. There's like a freeing nature to playing a tabletop game where you're not yourself. And so you can act out those kind of feelings and those emotions and those moments in a way that like feels a little bit disconnected, but you still get that like catharsis, right?
Yeah. It's interesting to, again, in role play scenarios where you get to be the person that needs redeeming, or you get to be the person that forgives, or you get to be the person with power or without power. You know, like so many different life scenarios, and some of which will be very like relatable to your personal life, and other things where it's like part of the fun is the fact that this isn't my life, you know, and you still get to kind of have those different aspects of maybe other people's lives, you know? So, so interesting.
Yeah. You guys had even kind of talked about that in a previous episode, honestly, about like how you like, there's that like dichotomy of like, I want to do something different that I don't experience versus like, I'm going to stick with what I like because I know it well and I can do it well. But yeah, there's a cool aspect to that, honestly, that I do think tabletop role-playing games do really, really an interesting and good job with.
Yes, I agree. Okay, I have one more question for you, and I am eager for your answer. So, do you think that TTRPGs can be a tool for spiritual growth or explanation? Why or why not?
Yes, big ol' asterisk there, though. So I think regardless of your religious beliefs, you can explore your beliefs, regardless of religion, you can explore them further within the context of a TTRPG, but you have to have lots of open and honest conversations with your GM and honestly with your fellow players about how that could possibly go as well. I'm a big safety tool person. I think that they are really so important. And I think that it shouldn't just be a session zero thing. I think you need to revisit those conversations a lot, because particularly when you're talking about your religious beliefs or other belief systems in general, that is for a lot of people a core value. And in a TTRPG game, you are going to be challenged regardless of like whatever that core value is, whether that is because you're put forth with like a moral quandary or something like that. There's going to be a moment where that belief can be challenged, because maybe you run into an NPC who is not about it and they are like hitting you with the hard questions, right? Like, people should have the ability to explore those things, but you have to do it in a safe and healthy way. You need to inform people that, hey, this is something I want to explore, rather than trying to do it quietly. Sometimes you're gonna realize it in the middle of the game, like, oh dang, like I didn't mean to try to explore my religious trauma associated with the church, but you know what? Like, it's kind of coming out in that moment that you realize that you desperately need to talk to your GM, and you really should also inform your players, because if you're at a table, you should be surrounded by friends, right? Or if you're at a table and you feel like it's kind of a bunch of randos, at the very least, you need to honor and respect them and give them the opportunity to honor and respect you as you're figuring out that kind of story moment, right? So anyways, in a D&D game, sometimes you're going to get challenged violently, but like, no matter what, you're going to be challenged. Like, you're going to be successful as a character. You're going to fail as a character. You're going to have all these obstacles placed in front of you. And trying to do that while also navigating your own personal beliefs can be really difficult. It can be incredibly cathartic. Don't get me wrong. It can be so good for you and really cool and interesting for your friends. But you have to really make sure you are just careful. You have to be safe. You have to be healthy, right? Like, regardless if you're a Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, whatever religion you are choosing to go through, like, you have to make sure you are playing this in a safe and also respectful way. Not everyone at your table is going to want to deal with that. You might have a friend at your table who doesn't want to explore their religious trauma or doesn't want to explore their religious beliefs. So maybe you doing that there at that table is going to be triggering for them or traumatizing for them. And that's not fun for them or for you, honestly, because now you're having to deal with those like actual in-life repercussions. So I think, yes, it can absolutely be an opportunity for you to explore your beliefs. And I think that there are a lot of people who are going to take me up on that like invitation, right? Like, I think that you will find that you can absolutely, and you probably will grow in your faith if you are intentional about it, right? But I'm also going to remind you, right? Like, you're going to grow in your faith when you also make the decision to like spend time in your spiritual text. You're going to grow in your faith when you care deeply about people and care about the world and serve people and the world sacrificially. You're going to grow that way too. So you can role play, and it will, like, for a lot of people, it's going to bring you amazing catharsis, and it's going to be awesome. And I love that for you. But you are also going to have a greater impact of love and growth if you do it for real too. So yes, is it a tool for exploration? 100%. Will it help you grow? Yes. You're going to grow a lot more when you live it out, though.
Yeah, absolutely. No, so many important thoughts there that I hope everybody at least considers to see how that's relevant to them in their own games. Because like you said, in one way or another, like there will be real life relatable aspects to all of your games, but especially whether it's because something just comes up or you do intentionally want to explore a part of yourself or your beliefs. I mean, that communication piece is huge, because imagine if if your character, aspects of your character like means a lot to you because it is so personal to you. And so you picture them having this arc, or you picture them, doing this thing or overcoming this, like you have this idea in your head of how that's going to be. But if you're not communicating that, then who knows what another player or the DM is going to throw in front of you. And it's just going to completely tear that apart and be frustrating and possibly like low-key a little traumatic to be like, no, this isn't what I was wanting to accomplish with this character. And it feels personal. So, I mean, communication just helps so much with that. And I think it's smart also to consider the DM, but also players as well. Yeah.
Yeah. You're not the only player at the table. You're not the only person at the table. So like, yeah, you gotta, if you're going to play a tabletop role-playing game, you have to, I think one of the things that like you really need to step to the table with at the forefront of your mind is remember, yes, you're telling a story. Yes, you are role-playing, but this is a game and you are all here to have a fun time, right? You're not going to have fun if people are not feeling respected or cared about. And so if you are stepping all over some toes for a character moment and you wrote this character to be a jerk, congrats, buddy. That's not very fun. Mm-hmm. But also like your core beliefs, your religion, your system of understanding the world, whatever that might be. If you're looking to explore that, you really need to have those conversations for your health and safety and the health and safety of your friends too, right? If you're not willing to have those conversations, you should probably just go write a book. I mean that in the kindest and sweetest way possible.
Yes. This
is a story for you and the people at your table. Mm-hmm. It is not just your story. And so, yes, you can definitely use these games as tools for self-reflection and for growth. I have given you several examples that's something that I do. And I'm sure that Brooklyn and Cade are also doing things along those lines for themselves in different ways too. That's normal and good. But when you realize certain parts of that and how deep and hurtful that can be for you if it doesn't go the right way, because here's the thing, you're going to roll some dice and it probably won't go the right way. You got to be honest with those things, right?
Yeah.
Your DM can then help you in those moments where the dice aren't very nice to you. And then your friends can support you in the midst of doing that too. So
yeah. For sure.
I think it's really important to make sure you are communicating with the people at your table, not just at session 0, but throughout.
Yeah. And I think that, like you said, there's all that aspects of in-game stuff and trying to do that the best, healthiest way possible. And then it will always go beyond the game though. And if you are going to use it for different exploration parts of yourself, then it really won't serve you if you're not then going out and doing something about it, which admittedly is going to be harder than role playing it, even though it's already hard. D&D can already be like hard and challenging. It's like, okay, but if you really want it to make a difference for you, then there's a lot of also actionable items to then go out and like live your life. So it's really interesting to think about using TTRPGs for all kinds of uses, but then also like following through and making that happen, I think is really fascinating.
Follow through. Oh, no, you summed that up so well. Thank you, Brooklyn. You took my 10-minute rant and distilled it into a great sentence. Oh, beautiful. Thank you.
Oh man. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. Everything I could have possibly hoped for. I think that so many people will resonate with what you are sharing and be really interested in it. So I appreciate you for just being able to articulate all of that. And again, being willing to talk about something that just a lot of people aren't. So it's fantastic.
Thank you for having me. Seriously, this has been so much fun. I look forward to just I hope that for anyone who listens to this, just that, you recognize that, you know what? I'm going to let the episode speak for itself. Just thank you so much for having me here. Yeah. Seriously, this has been an absolute honor and a pleasure.
Yes. I agree. It's also been a pleasure for me as well. So now I just want to take a minute to shout out a couple places people can find you. I mean, we've kind of talked about it all, but I will have links to everything specifically in the show notes so that it's really easy to find. But it sounds like you are on TikTok and Instagram. and it's the gray area with underscores between those
bunch
words.
of underscores in there. You'll figure it out, guys.
Yes, I'm like, if you type in the gray area, I'm sure you're going to come up. Like, you don't even have to try any hard thought. Not to mention, you can just use the links. But then in addition to that, we also have the Misty Mountain Legends Teens in Space. Season 2 is what you're a part of. And season 2 is called Out of Time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful. I'm not going to lie. Like, you totally piqued my interest with that whole show. So I know before this episode, I was saying how I was a serial, like, listen to the first couple episodes of something and never go back to it. I won't guarantee I will get through it. But I really want to go try it.
No, the fact that you're even interested is huge. Seriously. It's so sweet. I really, really appreciate it, actually.
Oh, it would be so fun to hear you play. But I wanted to ask you, is it the kind of, even though I know that it is a sequel to the first campaign, is it one where it's like, highly recommend listening to campaign 1 first, or can you jump into campaign 2?
I think you can jump into campaign 2. There are some like character tensions you will very quickly pick up on that originated in season 1, but it is not difficult to just jump right in with season 2, if I'm going to be honest with you. And also, Luke and Anna, they're the folks who like run the Misty Mountain Legends channel, and they're awesome. They did a like recap episode that distills like 40-hour-long episodes into like an hour's worth of listening time. And they did a really beautiful job of doing it, like in an in-character way, which was so freaking awesome. So that helps a lot. I would, if you want to jump into season 2, you don't have to listen to that episode, but it does really, really help. But yeah, no, if you want to just jump in and check out season 2, you absolutely can. If you want to check out season 1, though, it's great. There's a lot of laughs. There's still a lot of laughs in season 2. There's a lot more cosmic horror, though, so just be warned.
I love it. Okay, is there anything else you want to shout out? Things you want to promote?
Just not really. Just be in your communities, my friends. Like, actually participate in being in your community, regardless of what that is, whether that's tabletop role playing, whether that is your church, whether that is your temple, whether that is just being in your city. Like, participate. Be a part of this. You are not meant to do something like life alone. You are meant to do it in community. So regardless of what that community is, actively be a part of it, serve it, care about it, and help it grow bigger and better.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I love that. You have to find your community. You've got to find your people. Yeah, like you said, life is just not meant to be done alone in one way or another. So, okay, thank you so much. And I'm excited to release this in the next couple of weeks. And let's see, the outro that I keep forgetting to do. Let's see if I can do it for the first time without messing it up. Remember when life knocks... Wait, is this how it starts, Kate? Okay, yeah. Dang it. I should have just gone for it. I would have had it just fine. Remember when life knocks you flat on your back? All you got to do is keep rolling, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Oh my gosh, I could have just done it the first time.